So we're in a cost of living crisis right now, and there's even a war going on in Europe. So what could this mean for property prices and the property market in the UK? Let's go and take a look. The UK property market has had a massive bull run recently. Prices have been going up and up and up, and we've still got massive growth that we've seen over the last 12 months. But something is changing. We've got the cost of living going up, mainly through the cost of fuel and the cost of energy being higher. That's affecting infrastructure as well as just filling up your car, because we need to get food from A to B and we need petrol and diesel to be able to do that. So this will filter through to the cost of food rising and the cost of other goods and services increasing. We've got inflation at well over 5%. It's predicted to go up to over 7% this year. And that's mega. We've never seen it that high in recent history. And to put it into some context, the Bank of England's job is to try and keep it around the 2% mark. So we're way above where we want to be. But a lot of that is out of our control when it comes to that cost of energy. And then when we take a war in the mix and the annexation of Russia essentially is what's happening, we're putting Russia out in the cold, and we're going to stop taking in their oil, their fuel, their goods, and it's something which is then impacting the cost of everything else around us. How long is that going to have an impact for? Well, we don't really know, because we don't really know how long this war is going to go on for. But in reality, the Russian economy is going to tank. They're not going to recover overnight. So it's highly unlikely we'll go back to trading with Russia in the short term. So we need to find other solutions for our energy security. So how is this going to then move on to the property industry? So the property industry runs on supply and demand. So when property prices have been pushing up like they have been over the past few years, it's because there's a massive demand for property and not enough supply. Now, there are still people out there who are wanting properties. They've saved their deposits, they're ready to go, they've got banks ready to lend to them, they just can't find a property to buy. We're talking about homeowners here in the main. So there are still people out there that have got cash ready to go. They're not really saving anymore. They've got their deposits, they've got their banks ready to lend to them, and when they're buying their homes, all they need to do is go and find the property. Because there are fewer properties on the market and still a lot more of these types of people wanting to buy, the property prices are being held up by that. In fact, they're probably going to still increase slightly. I did a video previously where I talked about the pressure being more likely to be upwards with property prices because of where we are against the national average, we're still quite a way below it. I recorded that before Russia invaded Ukraine. So has my view changed? Well, in the short term, no, it hasn't, because of the reasons that I just mentioned. Over the long run, I think there's now an indication that there is going to be a recession in our future. Let's take a look at the history of property prices. Well, there's a lot of evidence and commentators that talk about the 18-year property cycle. Now, this is where we have basically like a crash, then it leads into a recovery, then you have a bit of a dip, then you have a boom before another crash, and that cycle takes approximately 18 years. Now, we're starting to come towards the end of the next 18-year cycle, if that comes to fruition. So we've kind of had our mid-cycle dip, and we're on the up again. And in fact, the pandemic, some people thought it was going to start a recession. It didn't. Well, we had a short-term recession, but actually in terms of property prices, they started to shoot up dramatically. And I still think they will continue to go up whilst we still have that level of demand for buying properties. However, there are people today which haven't yet been able to save for a deposit where their cash is now being squeezed. So they're not going to be able to save as much, they're not going to be able to move as readily, so therefore they're going to be thinking about pausing on buying a house. So that's going to reduce demand. So less people wanting to buy, supply will probably remain constant or then start to increase as some people potentially want to sell to capitalise on this and have cash in the bank for the worst case scenario that they might be perceiving is going to happen. So in summary, that's a reduction in the number of people wanting to buy. So house prices are going to continue to go up, in my opinion, but then probably will start to slow. And then in the next maybe 3 to 4 years, we'll start to see the impact of all the extra borrowing, all this inflation on prices. The war essentially started back in 2020 with the pandemic, and people can only generally succumb to about 4 or 5 years of that level of borrowing and taxation and inflation. So by 2025, 2026, that's the end of the 18-year cycle anyway, and I think the reasons why we're going to have that massive crash are now plain and clear to be seen. So keep investing, but keep an eye on what it is that you're doing, what strategy you're employing. Capital strategies, I think, are still good for the next couple of years, as the property prices are still going to be high, and they're going to remain high because of this demand and latent demand from people still wanting to purchase. But then as that drops off and people start to have less disposable income, less savings, then we're going to start to see a market fall. And that's where we want to then start buying properties and looking to get into properties which we can then rent out over the longer term, because that's when rental demand will also increase. So hopefully that's been of value, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please do pop them in the chat below. And by no means is this an exhaustive list of all the things that could happen in the property market. It's just to give us a flavour of things to come. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and I shall see you in the next video.